come together and decided in a conscious method to hate and to dismiss and to dislike any other group based on Jews and non-Jews. The Canaanites, this was a heavily common. There's no commandment to hate them. There's no commandment to hate. In fact, there's no commandment in the Torah to hate anyone. The only time when hatred is mentioned, it has a negative word before that. So there is no commandment to hate, as you could probably realize on your own. Canaanites were in the land of Canaan, and that was meant to be the land of Israel. And in fact, we were commanded by God to get rid of the Canaanites because their behavior was not adequate to what God wants, and therefore we have given them the option of leave, and those who did not leave, we had to take care of them. So this has nothing to do with hatred. This is following God's commandment. But we could elaborate about it a little privately because that's deviating from our topic today. In any event, just to answer what you said, Demery, this is focused most on Jewish people, and soon you'll see why it's very difficult for Jews to get along with Jews. It's always been like that. I guess it's yeah. So the biggest question that troubles a lot of people: why do we call it baseless hatred? There's a lot of base to that hatred. There's many reasons to hate someone, justified or not justified. That's another question. But a person who hates someone, usually on a conscious, they feel like they're right.
Often said as closer to the core of this.
Mm-hmm.
5 Jews, 15 opinions. Maybe good, maybe bad. But at that moment was 5 Jews, 15 opinions, all using the sword against each other.
Mm. That's when the border is crossed between a bad idea to bad implication of it. I agree. I agree.
Because the level of basic hatred we're talking about here is beyond what a hateful, common man or society that you will have.
Yeah. Let's take whatever is defined as hate crime and just double it in 10,000 and then realize what baseless hatred is. Here's what, there's 3 most difficult hatred cases. One comes out of fear, another comes out of faith, and another comes, believe it or not, from broken heart. Broken heart could cause, and we'll see 3 stories in our sources, one from the Torah, the other from the prophets, and another from the Talmud, which relates to the days we're at, the destruction of the temple. From the Torah, we have several cases, unfortunately, of hatred. The book of Genesis is filled with not so positive stories between Cain and Abel, where Cain killing Abel, and of course Isaac and Ishmael and Jacob and Esau, and Joseph and his brothers. Why Joseph and his brothers is something that was chosen for this example, because the word hatred appears numerous times in that story. They hated him, they continued to hate him, it made them hate him even more, and we'll see some of the quotes. Amnon and Tamar, I don't know if you know the story, I'll tell you the story in a minute, about the son and the daughter of King David, and the Talmud, which is a story that leads to the destruction of the temple. So let's look a little bit about the first one, Joseph and his brothers. Let's see whether it justifies the term baseless hatred. Was it really baseless or not? So here's what the Torah tells us. These are the generations of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, being a shepherd, he was with his brothers with the flocks, and he was a lad, and was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought evil tales about them to their father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was a son of his old age, and he made him a fine woolen coat. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him, and they could not speak with him peacefully. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told his brothers, and they continued to hate him. Right? He told them about putting the piles of crops, and how his pile is being superior and they're being inferior. So his brothers said to him, will you reign over us? Right? Another second dream was that he told them about the sun and the moon and the 11 stars come and bow down to him, to Joseph, which ended up exactly happening in real life when Joseph became the king of Egypt, and his brothers came to him, and his father and his stepmother also came. Will you reign over us, or will you govern us? And they continued further to hate him on account of his dreams and on account of his words. The Torah gives us the word hatred. This is the the most dense part of Torah where the root hatred appears so many times. Um, and the question is asked, it doesn't look like it's baseless. It seems like they had a good base. He brought evil tales, and he was going. Yes, and he was favorite, and he was. Yeah, and he was. Jealousy. They hated him. The jealousy led them to hatred. Yeah, right? And he goes on and he tells them, you are going to bow down to me. I'm going to rule over you. I will be the king. You will be my servants. I mean, this is not a recipe for great brotherhood. Yeah. What's baseless about it? It doesn't seem baseless altogether. The second case, which is the most difficult and the most severe one in the prophets we have, again, by the description of hatred that is written, that is found in the scripture, is the hatred between Amnon and Tamar. I'll tell you the story. Amnon and Tamar were two brothers. They were not really brothers. They had the same father, which was King David. They were born from different mothers. Amnon was a son of a Jewish woman in the name of Avinoam. Tamar was a daughter of a non-Jewish woman. And King David, king was allowed also to have, on certain conditions, a non-Jewish spouse, whatever. It was a part of the war. The story is, you go to the war, you can have. It's a long story. Anyway, she was not Jewish and she converted. Wait, I didn't finish the story. She converted, and she converted. Her name was Ma'acha bat Talmai, and Tamar was very beautiful. Amnon became so involved with loving her that he actually became physically ill out of that love towards Tamar. He was going after her, and she wasn't really replying to his how to say she wasn't replying to his gestures or whatever. And then some of his advisors, or what was his name? I forgot. It doesn't go. Okay. Anyway, he advised him to be ill, to be sick, and to tell his father, King David, that he wants Tamar to prepare lunch or dinner or whatever for him, because that will make him feel better. And he waited for an opportunity. It was just him and her, and she prepared him some lunch and some dinner. And she approached the bed, giving him the food, and he asked her to be with him. And when she did not want, he forced himself on her. And after he forced himself on her, she obviously was not very happy over what had happened. And she told him that this is a disgrace to do so to the daughter of a king. She was his sister, a half sister. This is a big disgrace. How could you dare do that? How could you ever? And then in response to that, he started hating her. He started hating her. You see, he started hating her. Kind of weird, right? He started so badly. And look at the description in the prophet. And Amnon hated her with very great hatred. For greater was the hatred with which he hated her than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up and go. After that story took place, he asked her, or made her, leave his residence, his room. And the end of the story was, of course, not so happy. Tamar had a brother in the name of Avshalom, and he learned of what had happened, and he waited for an opportunity. And when that opportunity aroused, he went and killed Amnon over what had happened. He did it also in a sophisticated way. These are all, by the way, these are all kind of punishments, or these are all things that King David decreed upon himself over the story of Bathsheba. The story of Bathsheba, the famous story when he went and married Bathsheba, when it was a sin for a person in his level, and the prophet Nathan gave him the story, right, with the sheep, stealing the sheep to a poor man. I don't know if you know, look in Samuel 2, chapters 15, 16, starting from 12, I think. Anyway, and he decreed on himself that there will be some bad things that would happen. So one of them is the story of the rape, and then losing one of his sons, and then Absalom also rebelled against him and also died. Anyway, the word hatred appears in that context several times. Again, it's very dense, it's very crammed, a lot of hatred that's put in the story. Now, that's also, you can't put it as baseless hatred. It's obviously, there's one person to blame in that story, and it's surely not the lady, right? But the hatred is a result of what had happened over that. And the third story of hatred, and I cut that to 2 slides because it's a little long, but let's look at this is, by the way, Ruben, one of the pieces of Talmud that you're allowed to learn, and some people even say encouraged to learn on Tisha B'Av to teach us a little bit about the history. Jerusalem was destroyed on the account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Remember these two names, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Okay, Mr. Kamsa, Mr. Bar Kamsa. It sounds weird to us. It was a language, and one of them had another two letters name.
Discussing this with a Christian, he suggested maybe it's later, but that one was the son of the other.
I want to say that I heard once a theory of that, but I don't remember whether it was taken or not. Anyway, so two people, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. This is as there was a certain man whose friend was named Kamsa and whose enemy was named Bar Kamsa. He once made a large. Yeah. He once made a large feast and said to his servant, "Go bring my friend Kamsa." The servant went and mistakenly brought his enemy Bar Kamsa. The man who was hosting the feast came around, and Bar Kamsa was sitting at the feast. The host said to Bar Kamsa, "That man," meaning you, "is the enemy of that man," meaning that is, you are my enemy. What the hell are you doing here? What then do you want here? Arise and leave. Just to stop here, the person who was his enemy realized that his friend is doing a feast and he wants to make peace with him. So he came to the feast. So obviously you can realize in what state of mode he was when he came to that. Bar Kamsa said to him, "Since I have already come, let me stay and I will give you money for whatever I eat and drink. Just do not embarrass me by sending me out." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for half of the feast. Just do not send me away." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for the entire feast. I'll sponsor the whole event. Just let me stay." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Finally, the host took Bar Kamsa by his hand, stood him up, and took him out. After having been cast out from the feast, Bar Kamsa said to himself, "Since the sages were sitting there and did not protest the actions of the host, although they saw how he humiliated me, learn from it that they were content with what he did. I will therefore go and inform Ichul Kulza against them to the king." He went and said to the emperor, "The Jews have rebelled against you." And you could read the continue of the story where it didn't take much to, it took a little match to ignite that fire, which unfortunately there was no way back from. The king, he told the king to send, he actually was a little more creative than just saying, he told the king to send offerings, and he made all kinds of blemishes in the offerings. They didn't take the offerings. Anyway, the story evolved to the destruction of the temple. So, Akamsa or Bakamsa Chavar Yerushalayim, on two people whose name was similar to the other. Now, you could see that hatred. You could see the hatred in the host's eyes, and you could see the hatred in Bakamsa's eyes over what had happened to him. And Chazal, our sages, define this as baseless hatred. And the question is, why is it baseless? Why is it baseless on one side? Why is it baseless on the other side? If the rich person hated, he had an enemy named Bar Kamsa, probably he had a good reason to have him as an enemy. And could we blame Bar Kamsa for going, or what happened to him? He agreed to pay for the whole meal, and he was casted out like a piece of junk, and everybody sat there and nobody protested, nobody stopped. Could we say that this was baseless? Of course his hatred was rightful over what had happened to him, yes?
The story criticizes the sages twice. Here, they're criticized by not having protested
Mm-hmm.
against one. That is the personal judgment of Bakanus and either right or wrong. But further on, the story criticizes sages in a way that is no doubt the sages were wrong. The rejection of the
Of the
sacrifice.
offerings, right?
It is recorded also in Jewish sources that around that time the Jews suspended the sacrifice on behalf of the health of the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is related to the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell you, he threw a match into a pile of wood that was waiting to be burnt. It wasn't like he didn't have to go and rally.
Sages have not been foolish enough to, based on close to nothing, suspend the sacrifice on behalf of the emperor. The emperor would not have thought that Jews have rebelled.
Mm-hmm. Well, sages can make mistakes. There's no in our history, starting from the book of Genesis through the end of Torah, including Talmud, we don't cover up the mistakes of our forefathers. We kind instead of not covering it up, we actually kind of stress it. Some people say even stress it more than necessary. They were sages, but they were mistaken. They were wrong. Well, it doesn't take away from the level of intellect they possessed. It's just even smart people make mistakes. Okay, so sages mean smart, not wise, righteous, holy, pious. All these are correct, but perfect? No, that doesn't say. Sages are not perfect. Like there's no human being who is. Absolutely, recorded by the sages. Mhm. So, so some people say baseless hatred. Okay, this term is used all the time. Baseless hatred. It doesn't necessarily mean it's baseless. It just means it's exaggerated. It's people respond in a disproportional manner to different things. So I wouldn't say it's baseless. I mean, there's obviously a base towards it because of that evolved, but it grows to gigantic measures out of literally something that could have been resolved in one comment, or maybe a little tap on the shoulder that could have bring things back to normal. So some people say baseless, that's what it means. But then there will be the term in Hebrew, in English, will be exaggerated hatred. Why is it baseless? What are we trying to say? What does the sages, what does the Torah tell us with calling it baseless? Why is it really baseless? So in order to understand that, we'll try to get two methods of a person working with himself, a person contemplating within themselves how to cope with, how to handle people who are doing bad things to me, think bad at me, say bad, and sometimes even do negative things to me. And because of that, we want to follow the path of the biggest forgiver, so to speak, that is described in the Torah, and that is Joseph, the righteous person who decided to forgive his brothers and he made a trial, he made a test of something very interesting, and we'll see soon. Just before we move on, it's interesting how this matter relates to what we said about these days, the 9 days of mourning, of sadness, but also it has to do with what we were commemorating on Friday. It is the first day of Av, and in fact, it is a yahrzeit, it is a passing day of Aaron the priest, the older brother of Moshe. Now, generally speaking, the Torah does not give us passing days. The Torah, there's no passing day. That's mentioned in the sages, of course, and in the Talmud, and that's all filled with teaching us when was Moses born, when did he die, and so on and so forth. But there's one yahrzeit, there's one passing day that is mentioned. It is the passing of Aaron the Kohen. Aaron the priest, his passing actually took place on Friday. Let's look at what the Torah tells us. This was last week's portion. They journeyed from Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor. At the edge of land of Edom, Aaron the Kohen ascended Mount Hor as the Lord's bidding and died there on the first day of the 5th month in the 40th year of the children of Israel exodus from Egypt. This was, by the way, the last thing. Aaron passed away, then Moses passes away, then the 40 years are up, and they're going into the promised land, which was told to them by God that it will take 40 years to get to the promised land. But Torah tells us it was on the first day of the 5th month. The first month is Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. The first day of Av, which was on Friday, by the way, is the yahrzeit, is the passing day of Aaron HaKohen. And the Rebbe explains something phenomenal about it. This brings another connection between the destruction of the temple on the month of Av and the passing of Aaron on the first of Av. The reason for the destruction was baseless hatred, and his correction is baseless love. Hillel would say, be of the disciples of Aaron, a lover of peace, a pursuer of peace, and so on and so forth. What was so special about Aaron? Aaron took as a life project to bring love between people. And Aaron did not show love only to those who deserved to be shown love, but even more so, he showed love to everyone. And those who might be rendered as not deserving to be loved, Aaron managed to get rid of the glasses that distinct between us and them, between me and you. And it was not them, it wasn't us. He gave love to every single person that he encountered. And this is the only way to overcome baseless hatred, is by baseless love. The Midrash is telling us, there's many, many stories the Midrash brings about Aaron, why everybody cried when he died, why they were not willing to be comforted over the passing of Aaron. The Midrash tells us that when two people were fighting, Aaron would come to another and he would say, I know you're fighting with Mr. So I got to tell you, I met him this morning and he feels so bad about what he told you. And he didn't mean it. It all went out of control. No, and then he went to the other guy and he says, "Oh, I asked him that I met this guy, and oh, forget it. He said I didn't." And he made them come together. And the Rebbe says us about when a child would drop out of school, and he would start, doing things that children do, sometimes not so positive. And of course, that would lead to be more alienated from society, right? Dropping out of school and doing all those bad things that people do in the street. Aaron would encounter such a child and would give him a hug and would tell him how much I love you. And I could see that you could reach so far in life. I could see that you could become a wonderful person. And when that boy would want to steal again or to do something negative, he would remember the words of Aaron and say, how could I disappoint Aaron, the high priest? Remember, this is the most spiritual person in the Jewish people. We have Moses, the leader, who does everything, technicalities, right? He has to take care. Are we going now? We're sitting now. This is what you do. And we're talking about someone who's lofty, who's completely out there in speaking, communicating to God. And he comes to the people who would need the most love, but unfortunately don't get love because of different things, that some in their fault, some not. And he would, and that would cause the person to say, how could I let down Aaron? Aaron the Kohen, the high priest, he came to me. He says, I could be a great man. How could I let him down? And because Aaron believed, and he didn't just say it on a superficial level, he actually did believe in other people, then he would actually make changes in other people's behavior. So Aaron was all about loving peace. Not only loving, everybody loves peace. You don't like peace? Aaron was a pursuer of peace. He was proactive in getting peace. And he did anything in his might to make peace. And that maybe was right. It wasn't true. Mr. So-and-so didn't tell Aaron how bad he felt over what had happened this morning. He probably was full of himself, and not only did not say that, he could have said the other way around. And obviously that poses a question, but when understanding what really happened here, then, and we'll soon see a little bit more about what really is hatred, you could realize that indeed party A and party B are liking each other. It is just something that's in between that needs help from outside to be removed. And not necessarily we could have that on our own. We need a third party. In many cases, we need a third party. And Aaron was not saying an outright lie. Aaron said, when Mr. So-and-so told me he feels bad about what happened, and Mr. So-and-so never mentioned that, but Aaron saw and realized that, yes, he did feel bad. Yes. And because of his thought, that created reality. That made peace between, again, lover of peace, pursuer of peace. That's a big thing. That's what Aaron was all about. So this is the passing of Aaron, the first of Av. Baseless love is the remedy to baseless hatred.
Jews are put on top of the scale, pride, wisdom, then justice, then truth, and perhaps only them after all these things. That might be true or not that the Jews have acted this way in the past. However, maybe, according to the Rebbe, for the purpose of the generation that wishes to see the end of their son, this looking for peace must be priority.
Yes, certainly. I could surely agree with what you just said. About Aaron? Oh yeah, you can read about it. It's written everywhere in with regards to Aaron. Just look Aaron and you'll find pursuer of peace. You'll find different stories from the Midrash about other things. Now, this is very nice talking about baseless love. The question is, what happens when things go wrong? When things go well, Yes, baseless love, of course. But what happens when things go wrong? What happens when somebody does something bad to me? When somebody hurts me, physically, emotionally, mentally, somebody does something wrong to me. And we have King David also as an example. This was one of the lowest moments in King David's life. All of his life were like a roller coaster. I don't know if you read a little bit about, the book of Samuel, book of Kings, you could see a little bit about King David. Yes, I agree. I agree. But you know what? We don't know much of King Saul as much as we know about King David. King Saul was a righteous person. He was like a 1 year old. It says when he was a king, it says the prophet says King Saul was 1 year old as a king. 1 year old. You can't be a 1 year old. You can't say the word old on 1 year, right? Dr. Einhorn says no such thing. 1 year of age when reigning on Israel. And the Torah says he was like a 1 year old with regards to sin. No sins. What sin could a 1 year old have? Nothing, right? That's King Saul. And yet we find all kinds of things that took place. Anyway, what happened with King David at that specific moment was that his son, the one we spoke about earlier, Avshalom, rebelled against him. And he not only did he do some problems, he actually got a whole army together against King David. He had conquered Jerusalem and kicked David out of Jerusalem. You imagine his own son rebelled him, won against him, right? One, you could say one against or one. How do you say one? WON. He won. He won. Beat him. He won against him. David had to run away for his life from Jerusalem, from his own son. And while he was running away from Jerusalem, just being busy with survival, literally survival, a person comes out to him. He wasn't just a regular person, he was used to be the head of the Sanhedrin, and he swore at him, cursed him. And did he not curse him? He casted some stones towards him. He didn't hit him. He was kind of off, but anyway, he threw some stones. This is the king of Israel, King David. Okay, still the king of Israel, though his son rebelled him, but everybody knew who King David was. He swore at him and he cursed him and he threw stones on him. And King David, speaking of Saul, realized that now things that took place in the past are coming back after him. Abishai ben Sumai, who was the minister of army, he was the general of King David, immediately pulls out his sword. What is this thing? Somebody curses at the king and throws stones. Let me get up to it and get rid of him. How do you? And King David stops him. He says, don't go. And what does he tell him? He says like this. King David, his name was Shimi. Shimi was the person throwing the stones and cursing at him. And King David says, and the king said, what is between me and you, sons of Tsuya, son of Avishai? It's his general. So let him curse, because the Lord had surely said to him, curse David. Who then shall have the right to say, why have you done so? King David says, if somebody comes out and curses me, instead of going out and beheading them over cursing the king, I should think, you know what, if they're cursing me, they probably have a good reason to curse me. And I probably deserve it to be cursed. And remember, this is not a time where King David was taking a walk in the park and like, who cares about this guy? This is running away for his life from his own son, from his kingdom. And a person takes advantage of the situation. It goes out and opens up a mouth against the king of Israel. And instead of King David getting offended or responding, he'd say, let him curse. If he curses, that means that God had told him to curse. Surely God had told him to curse. And there's a story about a chassid. Where is it? Yeah, Rabbi Yawon Kalin. There's a story about Rabbi Yawon Kalin where one of his chassidim told him that his wife is giving him a hard time. Every time she says, what's wrong with you? You're useless. You're this. You're that. He says, I bring people home, and instead of having a nice time, she always ruins the party. And says, what are you doing? You're littering. You're ruining the furniture. She's giving me a hard time. So Ibn Kalim gave him a blessing that everything will be okay, and he went back home. And after some time, that chassid, that person, had to go to Kiev for business. This was in Russia, Ukraine, whatever that was. And when he went in the street, somebody jumped at him and says to him, like a nice Ukrainian, you filthy Jew, you stole my wallet, you took my money, this and that. I don't know you. I just came here. I'm not here for. And beat him up, and they took him to court, and they stripped him of his clothes, and obviously there wasn't, and he had to hire a lawyer and waste money, and eventually he proved that he wasn't the person. He didn't steal the wallet. He doesn't know the wallet. He doesn't know the guy, and he came back home all like somebody who went through. And after he came home, before getting home, after he comes to his shtetl, he goes to Rabbi Kalin. And when he came, he saw the Rebbe, Rabbi Kalin, standing in the door path. And he says, you don't have to tell me. I know everything. I only have a question to you. You were supposed to be punished. Where would you rather be punished? In your own home or in Kiev? That's your choice. That's your choice. You want to be. Yeah. He says, I could see that there was a decree of some punishment that laid on your head. The question is whether you don't want to take it here, you get it somewhere else. And the foundation, it's a funny story, of course. The foundation of this is that a person does not have the right to hurt me unless I deserve to be hurt. Okay? A person cannot hurt me. A person cannot do anything to me unless it was decreed upon me from above. There are many cases it wouldn't have happened unless. Yes, yes. Oh, the Rebbe could have seen further, right? He could have seen his route. You could see it coming, basically. But us as people, yeah, we could say if this happened to me, that means it was supposed to happen to me. I know there's bad things happening to you. I'm not saying anything. Oh, okay.
Where is the place of innocence then?
The base of innocence.
Somewhere, somebody's getting hurt who doesn't deserve to be hurt. It's an innocent person getting screwed by a bad person.
So I'll answer you. The account is as follows. The person who gets hurt deserves to be hurt. We don't know why. We're not judges. We're not God. We don't open all the books. The question is, the person who hurts is going to have to give account over what they did. Okay? That's something, not a question. It's a statement. He has to give account of what he did. In other words, if I'm going to come and slap you, and then I'll say, you know what? If you were not supposed to be slapped, you were not slapped, right? And then I won't do that. Don't worry.
No,
but then I have an open account with God. In other words, somebody who has been decreed to have, I'm not the person to go over doing it. Okay, if God decides He has His ways. In other words, if you were to take that even further, not just blaming the victim or blaming the innocent, you could say, okay, I could go around and do whatever I want in this world, because if I'm going to hit someone, probably because they deserve to get hurt, right? But that's not the way it goes, because the person, the aggressor, always has to give account of their deeds, of what they did. So, by the way, this guy Shimei was punished later. It was Solomon, King Solomon, the son of King David, that came to finish up the story of what it started.
In a more grand level than just the relatively smaller sins of common people, it is said that Nebuchadnezzar was the Torah of Hashem, but doesn't mean Nebuchadnezzar is out of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even Pharaoh, right? We talk about Pharaoh, Egypt. Pharaoh his heart was stiffened by God, and we see him getting punished in all these punishments. What do you want from him, right? You made him not release the Jews, yeah, but then only in the last 5, in the first 5, he did not. So Pharaoh received a godly order. You have to torture the Jews, and he did it. But the problem is he liked what he was doing. He enjoyed the fact. He enjoyed the process, and that's why he was punished so badly. You got to torture the Jews because that's a decree that was given to Abraham 400 years ago. That's something we don't know why, but that's what God said. But are you going to do it with all heart? And he was enjoying every minute of it. Slaughtering Jewish babies and bathing in their blood. That's a little over what God had commanded. Yeah, working hard over the bricks and building those buildings, that's one thing. But anyway, that's why Pharaoh was punished so much. Anyways, the Jewish belief really makes us understand the world is not a hefker. You know what is, how to say hefker? Hefker is no man's land, right? What is, the world is not a no man's land. Hefker, you know what is? Hefker, it's like a zoo. Yeah, zoo or no rules, or no offense to any animals, unfortunately. Yeah, law. So a person says, and nobody could hurt me unless I deserve. A person does not have the choice to do something against God. So if something had happened to me, that means so instead of getting upset over the messenger, and that's a very difficult thing to do, and we'll soon see who did that, not getting upset on the person delivering the message, right? Somebody, a mailman comes and gives you a letter with a fine that you were fined by the court for driving drunk or whatever. You don't get upset at the mailman. You don't hit him, and he's like, "What do you want? I just delivering the. I was just called to deliver the message. That's all I need." He's just giving you a letter. You open the letter yourself. You'll see all the bad news. Are you going to get upset at that? Seriously, a person does not get upset. Just relate to it the same manner. Somebody does something wrong to you. Don't focus on that person. Focus on what had happened and try to realize there's a message that God is trying to deliver to you. Now that person causing harm to you, they have to face an account with God. That's not your story. Anyway, here's what the Sefer HaChinuch says. A person should know and put into his heart that everything that happens to him, good and bad, the cause of it coming to him is from God, blessed be He. And from the hand of man to his brother, there would not be anything without the will of God, blessed be He. Hence, when a person caused him pain or hurt him, he should know for himself that his own sins caused it, and that God may be blessed ordained this for him. And he should not place his thoughts to taking vengeance from the one who pained him, since he is not the cause of his evil, but rather the sin is the cause. Like David, peace upon him, stated, leave him to curse, since the Lord told him so. He made the matter depend upon his own sin, and not upon Shimi ben Gera, the person who cursed at him. Now, this is just, we'll say this is the first floor of what we're trying to say. Joseph, though, went another step further and made a phenomenal impression over Jewish history forever by him responding even more than what the story of King David and other stories in Jewish history. Joseph not only did he not get upset at what the brothers did to him, he not only looked to seek revenge with his brothers over what had happened, he did not even look at it as a bad thing. He managed to find the good within it, to bring that good out, and to not see any negativity whatsoever in what had happened. And soon we'll see what exactly took place with Joseph and how he did that. We'll try to realize how he did that so we could also try and emulate it, even in a certain way. Um, well, it is the Joseph story, but keep in mind that even becoming rich, I'm about to tell a story. The story of the millionaire who couldn't sign, it's a famous Jewish story. I just read today that it may not happen. Maybe it didn't happen. As a child, I always thought this story was completely true. But then I realized it was a story about the person who wanted to get a job. He was kind of useless and kind of, bad at everything. And he wanted to clean the synagogue. He went to the rabbi or to the person in charge of the synagogue. So you need somebody to clean it there. We need someone to clean the synagogue. And he says you have to clean here, clean there. And at the end of the day, you need to count the coins at the charity and write on a piece of paper how many coins, because this is what we pay the bills with. And the person said, I can't write. I can't read and write. Well, you can't have the job if you can't read and write, right? Even that is deprived. He's deprived of. And then the person went to the market and bought a box of vegetables, a box of tomatoes for $10 with 10 kilos, and then he sold each kilo for $4, and he made $40 out of $10. And the next day he did it again and then again, and within several weeks he got a truck, and then within several years he got a fleet of trucks, and he became a millionaire. And then he went to whatever, sign a loan, sign something, a mortgage, whatever, and they told him sign your name, and he says I can't read and write. And they said, so if you could read and write, how much more you would get? He said, no, if I could read and write, I would be cleaning the synagogue today. That's probably where I work. So, it's a story. There's so many versions running around that story, but just look for it. You'll find all kinds of answers. Anyway, there is truth. There's a kernel of truth in what you just said. Joseph reached royalty. He was the king of Egypt. He was in a level where he could have forgiven. But it's not only his forgiveness that we're discussing, it's about his outlook. And that's the perspective he adopted to himself. And that's something we can emulate. Yeah, okay, somebody hurts you and makes you rich, you're probably not that upset with them. But the perspective that you have on life is something not always easy to do what Yosef did. Here's what the Rebbe says about Yosef. O shepherd of Israel, hearken, he who leads Joseph like flocks. That's a verse in Psalms. According to what it says on Yalkut Shimoni, Joseph rewarded his brothers as it is their actions that led him to be the king of Egypt and save the entire world from famine. Although their intentions were not all that positive, nevertheless, he only looked at their end result. So too, God will reward us based on our actions, and even the wicked of Israel are full of mitzvot, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. This is taken from two pieces. I put them together, and now I see I did a bad job because I skipped some things. What happened with Joseph was that he made people understand that, okay, here I'm getting to it. For some reason I wrote it here. Okay, we'll get back to Joseph. There's a story that took place on November 2015. This was in Rishon LeZion, Israel. There was a terrorist attack, and a terrorist from Gaza or whatever that is started stabbing people, and he stabbed three people. One of them was a person named Daniel Cohen, who was working at a restaurant in the city of Rishon. Daniel was taken to hospital, and because of the wounds, they had to operate on him. And when he operated, his gut, what is it called? The intestines. Yeah. They opened it up because the wounds it was deep to it, and they found cancer in a very high advanced level, which already threatened the person's life. He was a young person, didn't even know that happened, and because of the surgery, because of the terrorist attack, he was spared because they managed to, they got rid of the cancer and they had to go through chemotherapy and all that, but eventually he lived through it, and his life was saved because of the terrorist attack that took place. The famous stories printed in the newspapers and anywhere. Now, nobody would come and say that Daniel would go and give a reward to the terrorist attack. To the terrorist, he wanted to kill him. He did not only want to kill him, he tried to kill him, and he did it in a very, very explicit manner. So nobody would come and say that he has to thank him. But having the perspective of looking at what had happened, and you're right, it is always looking back. When seeing what had happened, it's not easy to look forward. It's always looking back about what had happened and realizing that in fact things are going to the good. But still we're lacking something, and that's what I'm going to go into with Joseph. The evil itself, the evil action itself, the evil itself is something that you cannot come to terms with. Yes, it led to good results. Yes, at the end of the day, they lived. How did it end? They lived happily ever after, and you close the book. The end. Okay, but what about what had happened? The evil. How could you dismantle that evil? How could you relate to that in a way and say there's no room for hatred, only love is to there? So there was a story with the Alter Rebbe that took place in a small city in Russia. There was a couple that were orphans, and I don't know if you know, there's some in Jewish community, in other communities around the world, orphanage are a big deal, but specifically in those times, people were forced labor, people died young. Orphans, unfortunately, were abundant, and they were under the auspicious the liability of the community. And finally, they found a couple, an orphan and orphan. Is it both for male and female? Okay, in Hebrew, there's a difference between the two. Yeah, so a couple of orphans are getting nice, are getting married, and the Alter Rebbe himself came to the wedding because he managed to make that shidduch or whatever. And unfortunately, something really bad happened. The police decided to recruit people for the military, whatever service they had. And the first person they approached was none else than the groom. The groom himself, who was supposed to get married on that very same night. was recruited, was taken to the police station in order to be sent to the battlefield on the very same day. All the pleas, everything, everybody said he's getting married, let him have a wedding, a day, a two, whatever. And unfortunately, the what is it called? The police commander in chief made that order, and of course, it was intentionally. He knew that this was a wedding day, and the only way they could have free him was schmear, was money, right? Money talk, hongbao, hongbao. Yeah, all they needed. So unfortunately, the price tag was very high, and they didn't know what to do. The Alter Rebbe was in that city, and he said, "Okay, we got to get. I came for the wedding. We got to get this guy out. Try to get the money." But unfortunately, the figure was almost imaginary, and they tried to raise from here and from there. They didn't get it into even several percent of what they could. And the Alter Rebbe said, "Is there any rich people that live here? Is there anyone we could approach?" And they said, "Oh, you know what? There's one rich person, but you do? Oh, okay, okay." Uh, Yes, yes, you know the story. Okay, so they said there is a rich person, but forget it. What do you mean forget it? There's a rich person. Yeah, he lives there, but forget it. He doesn't give anyone anything. And he says, "What do you mean? I want to go there." You shouldn't go because he's not only does he not give, he's abusive. You go out there, you knock at his door, and he throws you a coin of a penny or something of that. Why? And say, "Here you go, leave." And the Alter Rebbe said, yeah, leave the change by then. Yeah. So the Alter Rebbe decided we're going there. And they try to tell him, you shouldn't go, it's disrespectful, you're this big rabbi, this guy doesn't care. And they knock at his door, the Alter Rebbe himself knocks at his door, and the person opens up, and then he sees the face of the Alter Rebbe. This wasn't just a regular person coming begging for money. And the Alter Rebbe says, maybe walk in, and they walk in, and they go into his office. And the Alter Rebbe starts telling him, I came here for this city because there's a special wedding, this orphan, they're getting married, and look what happened, they're taking him to the army, we have to get him out, could you help us? So the person was so upset, I'm sorry, this has happened, and he says, oh, I got a penny, I got a coin, and here, you can have it, it's all yours. And the Alter Rebbe took the coin from his hand, and shook his hand and said, "Thank you very much. God should bless you of your generosity. You're such a kind person." And they're about to leave. The Alter Rebbe walks around, about to leave, and the rich person calls him up and says, "You know what? Maybe I should give a little more. It's important." that he gives him a few more pennies. And the Alter Rebbe again shakes his hand and says, "Thank you so much. You've shown generosity. It's very important. It's beautiful." And he's about to leave, and this happens again. The rich person calls him again and says, "You know what? Maybe that's not enough because you have to," and this several times until he gets to the whole amount himself. And and the rich person was very emotional, very emotional. And he said, "Would you stay here for a few minutes? I'd like to share with you a story." And he says, "Of course." And he says, "Many, many years ago, I was a young lad, and I tried to look for a job, and I did what I could to get a living. I worked day and night in order to support myself, and I barely had what to feed myself. And one time I was stopped by a person, a beggar, a person who asked for a donation, and I took out a coin that I had, a little copper coin, and I said, "Here you go. I mean, it's not much, but I hope this could help you." And the person got so upset with me for giving him that little coin, and he threw the coin back at me. He says, "This is what you give me?" But that's what I had at that time. That's what I had. So yeah, so I swear I was so hurt I wanted to show generosity. I wanted to show compassion towards that person, but I was so hurt that I said, why people can't appreciate the effort I'm doing to make money. Not everybody is born with a golden spoon. Some people have to work hard for their money. So what is this whole belittling, right? Throwing back the coin at me. And I made a vow that I'm not going to give any more charity until someone says thank you to me. And this is my test. He said, I have a little coin, the same coin, right? It goes, nobody takes it from him. Everybody throws it back at him, right? There's this rich guy and lives in a mansion, right, with 10 pools that right, that he throws a little coin. You would throw the coin. I would probably throw the coin back at him and get lost with your little coin. But he said, nobody ever thanked me for that. And you're the only person, you're the first person to say thank you. And I couldn't give charity because I was with that vow. I was stuck in that vow that I made. I couldn't give charity. You're the first person. So finally, when you said thank you, this vow was broken and I could give more. So what really happened in that story? What made the Alter Rebbe approach him on the first place, right? The Alter Rebbe was warned, you shouldn't go. The guy is a jerk. Everybody throws a little coin. It's a waste of time. Just don't waste your time. But the Alter Rebbe says, let's go. Why did he go? He went because he realized something. And the Alter Rebbe was the composer of Tanya, okay, which speaks about Tanya, the book of the Alter Rebbe, which speaks about the soul and the relationship between the soul and the body, relationship with other people and God and so on. And the Alter Rebbe says, people are not bad. People are not corrupt. People are sometimes making wrong decisions. And they're making the wrong decisions sometimes even with right reasons. They want to protect themselves. They want to protect their territory. They want to protect their their entity. And this is what the Alter Rebbe felt, and this was true in this case and in other cases as well. Jewish faith teaches us and trains us to understand that people are not bad. And people might be aggressive, and people might be nice, people might be difficult or hard or easy to work with. But in the soul of every person has a godly soul that wants to connect. Because godly souls want to connect with each other. God is about unity. And we all as Jews have a part of God's reality within us. And that part is eager to connect with another part, with the same part. It is only the animal soul that we possess that wants to protect ourselves, that wants to protect itself. And sometimes it chooses the path of animosity, of hatred, in order to protect ourselves. And here is what lies the answers to our question with regards to baseless hatred. Why is it baseless? Because the hatred is in vain. The hatred is not supposed to be there. It has no base. It has no foundation. You're fighting an enemy that does not really exist. You could say whatever you want about another person, but you can't see through their heart. You can't see who they really are. What could you relate to? Their actions and their talks and even their thoughts are not open to you. But what could you could only respond to what you see. So basically that hatred that develops, which could have a base over different things that had happened and took place, and somebody will come and ask you, say you will tell them the story, they realize why. But the hatred is baseless because you're fighting an enemy that doesn't exist, because there is nothing to hate. If you just look closely into the person's heart, if you would have the glasses the Alter Rebbe had, but luckily he didn't keep it as his own. He taught us that, and he brought it to our understanding. But he says, if you look closely into a person, if you look deep into them, there's nothing to hate. Not only there's nothing to hate, there's so much more to love. There's so much to love in that person. And that is what happened with Joseph. Joseph realized that the key to forgiveness, and that's why he was considered to be the biggest forgiver in history. The key to forgiveness is that not only what we said earlier, the actions were matters, and eventually he lives as a palace in the king of Egypt, and obviously that's great. Everybody's happy. The end. That's not the case. That's not what Joseph did. We don't need Joseph for that. Joseph realized that what his brothers did to him was actually good, and there's nothing to be upset with them, because he feels that this is the same. This is him. Him and his brothers are the same. This happened to be his brothers, his own flesh and blood, but this relates to every person, because we are all brothers and sisters. We're all one nation. And what led Joseph to that conclusion? And we spoke about it I think this year when we were talking about Joseph. Joseph made his brothers go through a test. You remember the story of the test? We spoke about it in Parashat Vayigash. Joseph takes away the younger brother, Benjamin. And he says, right, the story with the goblet, right, with the cup. He plants it in Benjamin's bag, and they go, and then he comes back, and he says, why did you steal my goblet? They say, whoever stole is going to be, you kill him, and the rest will be servants. And surely enough, it appears to be in the sack of Benjamin, and Joseph says, Benjamin will stay here as my servant. And now what happens? The brothers are united, and they say, either you return Benjamin, or we're going to kill you and everyone else in this room. We are not going away. We're not going back to our father without our brothers. And that's what made Joseph cry and say, let everybody out, and confess and said who he was. And he said, the same brothers who sold me as a slave, the same brothers who threw me in the dungeon and left and couldn't care less about me. I was put in a dungeon, I was put in a pit with snakes, with scorpions. They sold me as a slave for a little money. Did they really change? Yes, they did. Look at that. I'm taking a brother from them. He did the whole trick, right? The whole story with the goblet. It's here, it's there. Do you know where it is? He made him drink, and they were drunk, and he put it. And he says, the brothers are now coming and saying, we're not leaving without our brother. We're not giving up on our own brother. That means that they had changed. That means that what had happened 22 years ago was not real. So now they changed. That's what Joseph saw. Joseph saw that they really changed, that this was a mistake that they did with him, with Joseph, but they actually corrected their ways. And Joseph put the goblet, he made this whole scheme. He put the goblet in Benjamin's sack, and he told, okay, you all can go now. And then he run after them and said, where's my cup? Where's my golden cup? And they tell him, nobody took your golden cup. We were just your guests, and we just sat together. And they tell him, if you find the cup, kill whoever you find the cup, and we will be your servants. And Joseph says, okay, whoever I found the cup will be your servant, and you can all leave. He says, the discussion is like that. And here's what the Rebbe says about Joseph. By rewarding his brothers and overlooking their negative behavior, Joseph had paved the road to people of every generation. While looking at another person, do not be distracted with how they look or even behave on the outside. Look deeper into their heart. This way it will be far easier to relate to them and treat them in a positive approach. Moreover, says the Rebbe, this comes back to the person, him or herself, and causes my good side to come out and overcome any external negativity. It's not only rewarding in my relationship with another person, looking into their soul and seeing that they are actually good. It is only that they make sometimes the wrong choices, and they sometimes make the wrong comments over me or other people or groups of people. But looking into them, it's not only rewarding them, it's rewarding me. Because at the end of the day, I'm taking out my inner part outside. I'm bringing out to light my positive energy, because I'm able to look at people in a
Psychologists say that you're treated evil and have no conscience, and they take advantage of this very thing you're teaching them. So, in order for people to be able to practice this and not become damaged themselves, it behooves them to learn about personality disorders.
How many percentage of the population are?
125 are sociopaths, and that's only one of the personality.
Can I do what? Sure, I'll send you the whole
Narcissistic
presentation.
personality disorder is very prevalent. That's another personality disorder. It's a lot.
I'll tell you what the problem is with those disorders that you quote. Not you as an individual. The problem with those disorders is that people are not encouraged to cure their illnesses. When somebody is diagnosed as suffering from a certain disorder, it's like they get a certificate and they hang it on the wall. Listen, I'm a psychopath. Don't come to me with questions, with answers. I got a certificate. I'm a psychopath. And in fact, at a Jewish level, I'm not saying some people require mental help, because they have mental issues. I'm not saying it's not true, but at a Jewish perspective, if God had put you in this world, He had equipped you with the forces, with the energies to overcome all the obstacles that would come in your way. He made you able and aware to overcome all the obstacles. If you are put through an obstacle, you should know God had equipped you with the ability to overcome that obstacle. So having a certificate from a doctor with 3 PhDs doesn't really exempt you from the challenge.
What you're describing are neurotics, not personality disorder. Personality disorder, the psychotherapists say, to get them even to want to change is extraordinary. These are people without conscience who feel like they don't have a problem, it's everybody else, and therefore it's okay to take advantage of the others. They don't do, I'm a card carrying psychotic or neurotic, okay, I'm psychotic, but as somebody who is an expert on personality disorders,
Who is?
Jewish social group, actually a lady who worked with them, who was a medical social worker, 5 of us were after one day listening to her describe them. The psychotherapists, the neurotics dream of castles in the sky, psychotics live in them, and the psychotherapist collects, or the psychiatrist collects the rent. After 2 hours of
Nice.
talking about personality disorders,
Nice.
she said that, but then we all go, what about personality disorder? And she said, that's just it, they're not even on the map.
Oh, really?
They have no conscience. Psychotherapists call them
I never heard that.
evil.
Say it again. Who lives in the house and who collects their...
Neurotic dreams of castles in the sky. The psychotic lives in them, and the psychiatrist collects the rent.
That's a very nice saying, I must say.
Personality disorders
Are not even on that scale.
not there.
Some people suffer from disorders and are unable to fulfill morality, but actually convinced to a commodity. Even it doesn't go deep
When it's
inside.
to their advantage to gain an advantage of others, it's not the same. It's acting versus being moral.
Yes.
What about reading horrible things that don't
You see, God have wanted for this to happen. You see, we could say that if it happened, that means it needed to happen. Now, when you say God had wanted it to happen, of course, you're basically saying the same thing, just using different terminology. When you say it needed to happen, we're not saying why it needed to happen. And, the common answer to why the bad things happen to good people is that the question should remain open. In other words, if we would have answers to all those questions, we would justify it. If we, the famous analogy that's brought on it, a person who's from a village who doesn't know anything about medicine, he goes to the big city and he walks into a hospital and he hears somebody screams and he walks into the room and he sees a bunch of people with white robes are cutting the person's leg and he says, "What are you doing, you barbaric, crazy idiots?" And he's pushed away from the room and he said, "Come down. This guy's having a tumor in his leg and the only way to save his life is to cut his leg." And then he understands what was told to him, and he goes out and sits in the waiting room, hearing the person scream. This is before anesthesia. Hearing the person scream before anesthesia, and all of a sudden, the screams don't bother him any longer. Why? Because he understands. You see, when we have answers, I'm not implying there are answers, but if they were answers, if we were to get an answer to why the bad things happen to good people, we would stop asking the question. And we would come to terms with it. We'd say, okay, that's what it is, Okay, now I know, now I understand. And that's not what God wants us. God does not want us to consent with this and say, okay, now I understand. He wants us to fight. He wants us to struggle. He wants us to try and cure travesties, bad things that are happening in our society. Now, there's one thing about looking at something negative and saying, I have to help myself and other people get rid of that negativity. And there's another thing about blaming, about accusing, about developing hatred towards the person or the group of people that are behind that. And this is what we're trying to say. This is basically self-refinement more than what it relates to the other. It's about your own account as an individual. It's about the way you respond to things, the way you relate to things. It's not, you have no control over what other people do. All you have control is how you respond to those things that have to happen to you. And when we we're talking about Aaron, Demery, we're talking about Aaron who went into people and said, Mr. So and so is upset. He's sorry that he said it, he didn't mean it. Aaron used to do it to couples as well. People who were about to get a divorce, and he used to come to each other and say, your wife loves you. She told me she can't handle without you, and you mean so much to her, the whole world to her. And he would go to her and say the same. And the question is, how would it help? I mean, they were about to get a divorce. They're probably fighting for 20 years. You think one comment of Aaron would change everything? Moreover, you put them together in the same house after Aaron, and they believed him. He said, I met your wife, and she said she loves you, and she doesn't want anything but you, and he meets it. And he brings them together. Now what? How do you resolve all the issues? How do you take care of? I mean, they were almost getting a divorce. Obviously, they went through all these things together, right? And one of the answers that's offered is Aaron says hatred has so many excuses, but it sits on one single line of thought. What is it? That the other person hates me. The other person doesn't like me. And that's why I'm doing everything to protect myself. Because that person really is not interested in my favor. He is really not taking care of me. He doesn't care about me, or even more so, he hates me. He doesn't like me. And that fuels hatred. He doesn't like me. Why would I like him? She doesn't like me. Why would I ever feel any? Right? So Aaron says, what does he do here? He is actually telling you, basically, no, the other person does not hate you. You have to stop defending yourself with woe over a non-existent enemy. There is no enemy. The other person does not really hate you. The fact is, the other person feels you hate them, and that's why they respond in this way, right? So, and that's what Ramban Nachmanides says about a person who's, as the verse states, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. In his doing to you that which is not like your will, but rather rebuke him by saying, why did you go? Why did you do like this to me? Hence the meaning of, and you shall not carry sin for him, is to cover up your hatred for him in your heart, and not to tell him that's the worst thing. You hate someone and you don't cope, you don't challenge them, you don't do, you just say, as in you're rebuking him, if you approach the other person, he will make amends with you or repent and admit his sin, and it will be atoned for him. In other words, uh-huh. Yeah. So if you keep it within, that would not be resolved. If you keep it within, if you just and unfortunately it goes and builds and builds and builds until it explodes, right? Until it pops, and then unfortunately sometimes it's too late to come and offer some explanations and some I like you but I didn't mean it. So if you see something negative, if something was done to you and you are in a level that you could approach that person, do it. Go there, approach the person, say, I want to tell you what had happened, what you said, it was wrong. And I want you to know that this was wrong. And in many cases, unless they're a personality disorder kind of person, 1 out of 25, that's a lot. They would consent. They would say, okay, and you won't have any more base for hatred. So the hatred will really remain baseless. So it really is in our hand to make the hatred baseless, to prove.
This is not the doctrine of forgive absolutely everybody, or even less accept what they done to you without any reaction.
Mm-hmm.
There is an element of know that if I've done something to you, that is something you have done wrong, but that's in fact it's not between you and him, it's between you and Hashem.
And God, right, right.
And on the other hand, it is true that in the Mitzvah there are prayers to protect yourself from the harms to others, the harms that others might want to do to you.
Correct.
Many articles show that it's not an issue. I live in an imaginary world where harm doesn't exist, and dangerous people are not there going to do harm to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a foolishness.
Right, right.
It is, and it's not an issue of you forgive everybody.
Right.
It's more an issue of know what moves that person to act, and this probably is not able to you or something else.
Correct.
Even if able to you might be out of ignorance that can be corrected, or I'm essentially or essential to my life. My sometimes it works that even with some people with real personalities, not really personalities, of course. And sometimes it works to point to someone in any profit from you to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And very often the actions that you us by hate are actions that will not benefit to us even from a completely cold viewpoint.
Right, right, right. It wasn't mentioned here. It's more of uh, intellectual direction where it's just not lucrative. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it. And these are those reasons are brought up in many sources in many places. It's not worth it pursuing hatred. It's just you're hurting yourself more than what you're hurting others. You're corrupting yourself. You're corrupting your own intelligence, your own mental state over what had happened. And I agree. Those are obviously reasons to not choose going through the path of hatred. And
So the first two last things that are probably not personal, there's a touch of paranoia.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And the foundation for all that is the fact that I'm persuaded that the other person doesn't like me. And that's what develops that hatred toward. So that's why Aaron had so much success. He wasn't just telling people, oh, he's sorry about. He made them understand. He made them realize that the other person does like them, and he made them see through the woods. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Torah tells us about it. Yeah, he was pursuer of peace. He was all over the place with that. It was his life project. Serving at the temple, being the high priest, all these things are wonderful. But his life project was bringing peace between people. Yeah, that's what he was. Yeah. Okay, well then whatever. It's too late for the bridge. Anyway, this was just for today. On Sunday we have hopefully it will be a celebration when Mashiach will come. But if not, then Sunday is a fast. It starts on Saturday around 6:30 or so when it's sunset, something like that. I'll send you the times. And then there's Tisha B'av, the fast of the ninth of Av. If you are able to fast and you have no health issues, then you're supposed to fast. Of course, if there are health issues, then it's a different matter. And then at 6 p.m. we're having services on Sunday, and followed by the meal after the fast, which would take place around 7. So we have. Rick, you're healthy. No breakfast for you.
No breakfast, break fast.
Oh, break the fast. Oh, okay, okay. I'm sorry. That's
I wanted to comment about personality disorders.
okay, okay, okay. A theory?
Free and
Oh.
traditional